Hello and welcome back to the Charles Aris Executive Search Podcast. This is Kacey Toews, Associate Practice Leader within our Agriculture Practice, and we're back for another episode of our Industry Uncovered series, where we dive in deep into the world of ag tech with various industry leaders. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Judd. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Kacey. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, could you please start by providing us an overview of your role and organization?
Sure thing. So I am currently Chief Commercial Officer at Invaio Sciences. Invaio Sciences is a flagship pioneering company. Flagship pioneering basically is a Boston-based biotech incubator, for lack of a better term, where they basically build companies and send them out. Moderna is probably their most famous one in the ag space. But in bioscience, what we do is we take a lot of those sort of pharma technologies like have been so successful in pharma, like AI, machine learning, computational biology, and we apply those to biological crop protection products, particularly peptides or protein, small molecules. We're actually, started down this path with a solution for citrus greening in Florida, and now we're moving into Brazil. Basically, a system that basically it injects the tree with an antibiotic to help combat disease in citrus trees. We also have a broad pipeline of peptide product technologies to target, various fungal, bacterial disease. And then been with Invaio now for about 4 months. Came over to help sort of lead the launch in Brazil and develop the commercial team.
I love the coming together of health and bio ag tech. That's really interesting. So that should be a fun journey. So I'd just be curious, what are the most pressing challenges facing your industry right now, especially as an earlier stage company trying to kind of get into a new market?
Yeah, so I think when you think about my industry, I think more ag broadly, right? So crop protection. Certainly growers face challenges over the last 3 years post-COVID, and higher costs, higher interest rates. So their farm loans are much more expensive than they used to be. Higher input costs, labor shortages, weather. So the things that growers are dealing with today, especially for the last 3 years, have been very challenging. Same for distribution, retail, for manufacturers. Nobody's had a really great time these last 3 years. It's been a very competitive space, pricing pressures, et cetera. As I think about Invaio and sort of the more ag biological startup space, one of the challenges is there are a lot of us, right? There are quite a few startups in the biological space. There are international companies sort of moving into the U.S. market. One of the challenges really comes down to, can you differentiate your technology from what's in the market today? I consider Invaio work what I call those third generation biological crop protection technologies. Typically your Bacillus thuringiensis, your Variana, Bacillus fungicides, or sort of that Gen 1, I would say. We're trying to work on that next generation, which is, can we make the biological crop protection product more efficacious, more consistent environment? Can we improve the compatibility of products? So I think the challenge right now for any company like Invaio, for any startup, is, are you making something better than what's out there today? Can you differentiate your technology off? I think that's where AI, the machine learning, these tools that we're utilizing in our labs in both Cambridge, Raleigh, North Carolina. Got some really smart folks who are using these tools to find that next sort of generation of sort of natural peptides, natural compounds that help growers with, fighting disease, pests. So what I would say is, I'm not sure the biological space is really big enough for all the startups to be successful. So you really have to product focus to get to the market.
Yeah, absolutely. That differentiation is going to be key to kind of figure out who makes it and who doesn't, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, we kind of got into some of the technologies that you're utilizing. What emerging trends or innovations are you most excited about?
Yeah. So there are a few actually that excite me, and I think they're all sort of interrelated. So I think about sort of that biological space and really utilizing secondary metabolites, small molecules the first generation of biologicals are living microbes. In general, a lot of them are living microbes, so your bacteria, your fungi. What we're now starting to do, and what excites me, is we're starting to separate really the mode of action. What are the metabolites, peptides, molecules that do the work, and really bringing those out, making them more what I call biochemical, so they're more stable, more compatible, more consistent, more efficacious. So we're closing that gap from current biological performance, which is in many ways not necessarily standalone performance. We're actually closing the gap between that and what you would consider sort of conventional synthetic performance. So, whereas a bio maybe 50, 60, maybe 70% efficacious, we're trying to boost that up to 70% plus, 70, 80, 90%, efficacy against insects.
Right.
But what also excites me beyond what we're doing here at Invaio is really, I think, application technology. So precision applications are much prevalent. Growers aren't treating an 800-acre field as one field anymore. It allows so that the technology, sort of the drones, the satellite data, instead of sort of blanketing fields with a fungicide, they're able to detect infestations earlier and really target in the field what needs to be applied. And for me, that's better for biologicals, because once the disease is firmly established, it's really hard to control with biological. You need something more hardy, like a synthetic, where I think precision allows us to be more proactive in many senses. I think gene editing for resistance, we're starting to see that really build up in the space, not only in seed, also in biological as well. Making not only the crop more disease resistant or pest resistant, but we're also doing this with microorganisms, right, to make them more efficacious or more effective in the environment. Pivot Bio is a good example of that, with their nitrogen fixing strain, and who've had some editing done to them. So I think there's a lot of potential in that in the future, and it kind of backs off sort of that GMO stigma, because it's you're not necessarily introducing the foreign DNA. You're really using what's already in the organism or the plant to really upregulate or downregulate certain characteristics. Digital monitoring, like I talked about, there's now, you see sensors in the field or on your tractors that are able to detect pests or disease earlier. And then RNAi is another emerging space here in terms of spraying crops with RNAi molecules and hit a caterpillar with RNAis. There's viruses out there today that are being sprayed to target like calling moth and oriental fruit moth and certain insects. So in my mind, there's really a lot of cool technologies that are coming to the market. The key is, are they cost effective? Do they fit into a grower's established program? Can you get them to the grower alive? I know, or in many instances with microorganisms, that's been a challenge historically. But there's also technologies out there today that I think are really cool. They're really just boosting the current rhizosphere, the microbiome around the plant already that's there, and it sort of just boosts their ability to perform. So it sort of supercharges the natural bacteria and fungi.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about all these shifts in technology and then throw in regulation and market demand, how are they reshaping the industry as a whole?
Well, good question. Regulatory is a big piece of this, right? Can regulatory keep up with the changes that are coming in innovation? That's one of the things that challenges, I think, is challenging right now, especially when you think about Europe, where they have their Farm to Fork initiative, where they're trying to reduce synthetic pesticides, they're trying to reduce fertilizer inputs, but they've got to adopt the regulatory framework to support that. And to date, they haven't, but it looks like maybe they're moving along that journey. I would also say that Brazil has done a really good job of making it easier to adopt biologicals. And then I think also the U.S. is especially with like peptides, right? I think the EPA has to sort of consider how we're going to have the right regulatory requirements around things like peptides and secondary metabolites, et cetera. So I think that's still a work in progress. And of course, today, we're hearing about, layoffs at the EPA and federal government tariffs and what effect is that going to have. But I think you're starting to see, more sustainability mandates coming out. So not only in Europe, but also I think you think about the big grocers, the big retailers who are selling, produce and They know that their customers want more sustainable alternatives, more alternatives to synthetic pesticides. And I think growers are feeling that pressure as well. And that's really helped to lead to the adoption of biologicals as well. So I think consumer demand has really helped to drive the adoption of the biological market. For export markets, certain fruits and vegetables have to have, they have certain pesticide residue limits. I think biologicals really help to support that as well. And then worker safety, you get a shorter reentry interval or post-harvest interval. So biologicals help with grower economics as well.
For sure. And definitely something to watch for 2025, just with everything going on within like the tariffs that you said and sustainability being such a hot topic. It'll definitely be interesting what things look like a year from now. So great points.
And if I can add on that, I didn't mention earlier sort of the challenges in the industry. Tariff discussion is certainly that, with Canada, Mexico, and then others, China. Those are big trading partners for agricultural commodities, right? And that certainly affects commodity prices and crops like corn and soy, which is really, it's kind of been in the dumps already for the past couple of years. So these are things we're going to have to sort of see how it plays out, right? I think everyone wants fair trade. Everyone wants access to international markets for their products and their crops and their commodities. So yeah, that's going to be something we're going to have to pay close attention to.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to the Charles Aris podcast. If you're interested in accessing additional agricultural insights, including industry-leading compensation reports, subscribe to our newsletter at the link in the description. Now back to the show. So just kind of switching to the human capital component, what role does talent and leadership play in helping companies adapt to some of these changes we've been talking about?
Well, I think it's make or break, right? And I think as we think about the startup space, I think the leadership and having the right people is really what's going to separate the winners from the others. There's sort of that glue that turns chaos into opportunity, if you will, right? You have to have the right people sort of steering the ship. And that's where leadership comes in. You've got to make sure you have that strategic foresight, right? There's less ambiguity in the organization from the top down, that we all sort of know what the goals and objectives and the targets we're going for as an organization, have to sort of anticipate where the market's going, and they have to, leadership has to make hard decisions of where we're going to invest and maybe where we're not going to invest at this point in time. And certainly in that startup space today, which this is my first role in a startup. I've spent time at BASF, at Novozymes, which is now Novanesis, and Certus Biologicals. Those are all established companies. So risk appetite, I think typically in the startup space, the risk appetite might be a little larger, going after bigger, more ambitious goals or targets and diseases, et cetera. And so the leaders at the top of any organization, particularly in this bio space, which is still an emerging market segment, they have to create the vision and the goals and the roadmap for the entire organization. But the talent is really where it comes in. At Invaio, for example, some of the smartest individuals I've had the opportunity to work with, from our scientists, sitting down with the guys and really learning about, how we use AI to model certain peptides, and then how we establish fermentation processes to develop those, and we test those in the field. Really some really great specialized experience. And then sort of in a startup, you also have to have sort of adaptability and flexibility, because the sort of changes as everybody rolls up their sleeves and jumps in and does the job. So I would say, to summarize that, leadership has to set the alignment. What are we going after? You have to have a strong talent pipeline. I think startups, particularly like us, sort of attract people who want to work on the big things, the big problems. And as long as we're agile and we can sort of, earn our customers and partners' trust, I think that's critical.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of great points there. We've touched on a lot of good topics today, and I would love to hear maybe what advice you would give to some organizations trying to stay competitive in this evolving environment.
Oh, yeah. See if they want to take advice from me. I'm not sure, but we'll see. Look, it's know what you're going after, right? And we talk about leadership and sort of setting that roadmap. What is the prize, right? And make sure that's where your organization's focus is on, right? And I'm talking more from a biological sort of startup in this mentality, because if you think about distribution, retail, if you think about the big ag chems, they all have their own challenges of sort of staying competitive and sort of the evolving environment. But, I think for startups, you got to be product focused, right? You got to get products and technologies into growers' hands that work, that they have trust in, that fits into their grower programs, that are economical. I mean, that's been one of the challenges historically with biologicals is they tend to be a little bit more expensive. They're a little bit more difficult to manufacture. Make sure you solve the shelf life problems, the compatibility issues, because growers aren't going to, even if you've got the best technology in the world, if it's difficult for the grower to use, adopting is going to be challenged, right? You got to scale affordability in your manufacturing process. You have to build a grower-centric approach, and that's kind of what we're doing here, I think, at Invaio now, is solving growers' issues, right? It's you can talk about all the great things like AI and machine learning and all these great tools, but if you're not solving growers' problems, you're really not being grower-centric, and that's where you really have to be. Ride sort of those regulatory headwinds and tailwinds. I mean, biologicals have had some tailwinds behind them for adoption, but there are also some headwinds in terms of adoption and trust that we have to continue to overcome in the market. Certainly organic space, a lot of times people think biologicals are a little more organic niche, but I would argue that, their greatest growth is coming in conventional crops and row crops, right? But Brazil is really adopted to these biologicals and row crops. You're starting to see more of it in the U.S., but, more so around that crop nutrition, that biostimulant. Most every corn and soy acre planted in particular in the U.S. has a biological associated with it. And really, it's you make sure you've got the right people in the right place. Secure talent, expertise is critical. Supply chain, who's your market access partner? How are you going to go to market? How are you going to leverage distribution and retail? How are you going to solve some of their challenges as well? So historically, biologicals, shorter shelf life, that's been more difficult for distribution to manage in the warehouses. When we think biochemical with our peptides, it's really more along the lines of your conventional chemistries in terms of their shelf life, stability, compatibility. So they're going to be much easier for both distribution, retail, and growers to use. Yeah, I think, focus execution wins every time, right? If you are focused on your execution, if you have a good plan and good people, and you know what the prize is, you know what you're going after, execution at the end of the day wins.
Awesome. Those are some really great points. So thank you so much for contributing those. So now we're going to do a fun little speed round, which I'm excited about. So I've got 5 questions here that I'm going to spout off, and we'll see what we get here. So what is your favorite book?
So my favorite book is really books. Well, so it's really the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Tolkien's trilogy.
Okay.
It's something I read, years ago, and I find myself every few years sort of picking it back up and rereading.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so you may have expected me to say some business book or something like this.
It was.
No, but there's so many lessons you can learn from, I think, from Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings in terms of leadership, in terms of doing the right thing, people. But for me, it's just, when I like to read things that are either a little more historical or a little more maybe fiction. In those have been, I think, 3 books really. I've read The Hobbit and a few others as well, but those have been 3 books that really every now and then I sort of pick it up and reread a bit as well. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was not expecting that, but I love it. What's your go-to productivity hack?
I don't know if it's a hack so much, but I try to, every week. So every Friday afternoon, I kind of look at the week ahead, the next week ahead, what's going on, making sure that, I have my plan in place, in terms of meetings or travel, etc. So just to plan out my week ahead, and then at the end of every day, I sort at the end of every day, I sort of spend just a few minutes kind of writing down, what did I accomplish today? What are some open topics that I need to close? And then really looking at tomorrow's schedule to make sure, what I need to have prepared or where my mind needs to be for that following day. So it's really more just for me about being proactive. If I jump into the day without having already looked at it and being aware of what's required that day, then I sort of feel a bit off kilter.
Yeah, planning your day and your week is definitely a key to success in my mind. That helps me a lot as well. If you were in your current role, what would you do?
Well, have I won the lottery? I mean, if we're talking, or am I just maybe not? No, I always actually kind of, and as I went to high school and kind of went into college, I actually wanted to be a football coach. I played football in high school and some in college, and I kind of wanted to be a football coach. Sort of that team aspect. Shaping, sort of young individuals. The strategy piece of it was always interesting to me. So what I found out quickly is it's tough job and probably doesn't pay all that great. And so I switched over to business in college and kind of went that way. But yeah, I coached my sons and some youth football teams, but always enjoyed doing that. I always enjoyed coaching, either football, basketball, baseball. I've done it all.
Awesome. Is there one leadership trait that you value the most?
For me, I think it's servant leadership. Utilizing the talent around you. I always tell people, I surround myself with people smarter than me, so they make me look good, right? But it's really about being a servant leader. How are you supporting your team? How are you supporting, the people around you who have the tough job every day to deliver. Utilizing their experience, utilizing their mindset to make better decisions, right? So for me, the trait I've always tried to convey is to be a servant leader and lead with empathy and really utilize the talents of the team around.
Yep, that's definitely a great one. Okay, last question. What is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
One piece of advice is, don't, I would say, it's going to be okay. All the things that you worried about when you were younger, they tend to sort of resolve themselves, and life throws curveballs, but it's going to be okay, right? None of us are getting out of this alive at the end of the day, and enjoy life, enjoy your family. Don't stress over it too much. Yeah, I think it's going to be okay.
Great. Thank you for that. Well, this has been really fun and insightful. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you again, Chris, for joining us and sharing your insights. And if listeners would like to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
They can go to our website, Invaio.com, and look under our team, and you'll see me there. You should have my contact information. But thank you. I enjoy talking agriculture. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about the biological space. I'm passionate about innovation. And yeah, so any chance I get to sort of help the industry and further along the space, I'm always love to talk about.
Perfect. Well, we invite listeners to tune into our other podcasts from our Industry Uncovered series. And again, I'm Kacey Toews with Charles Aris Executive Search, and you can find us on the web at charlesaris.com. See you next time.